And following the recent floods in Queensland, businesses across the state facing some tricky issues, particularly when it comes to employer responsibilities. Of course, with 3/4 of the state now officially declared a disaster zone and other parts of the country affected, employers have to be quick to consider plans for employee safety as well as their business recovery. Here to tell you more is Managing Principal of workplace relations law firm People and Culture Strategies, Joydeep. Familiar face, of course, Joydeep. Warm welcome to you on this one. It's kind of one on which you've got the desire on part of businesses to keep things ticking over, but the understandable push-pull of workers who would be quite reasonably saying, I've got to be elsewhere for X amount of time. How's that best dealt with?
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a real challenge for employers. They've got so much to deal with in terms of their ongoing business and their commercial needs at a time when their people are probably going to need as much sympathy and support from their employer as you could possibly conceive. First and foremost, I think employers need to, as always, understand that there is a legal position in relation to employee entitlements. The Fair Work Act, recently introduced, of course, allows employees to take community services leave for precisely this kind of situation.
How do you define that? Because as you put it, there's a reasonable assumption made that that should be made available, but you've got to be coming under that definition of community service leave, right?
That's right, and I think it was expected. The genesis of it was very much the Victorian bushfires. I don't think anyone was thinking floods at that point in time, although it wasn't drafted specifically to address bushfire situations. The contemplation was that people would have an affiliation in some kind of formal sense with a voluntary emergency services activity or pastime. Now, what we're seeing happening in Queensland in particular is that people are chipping in. It's wonderful to see, but probably doing so in circumstances where they might not have had any need for or arguably interest in any formal affiliation previously. Employers are not well advised to be taking a very strict interpretation of that. I think it's available for everyone to see that people are doing what they need to do to save their homes or help the community, and that's what the legislation was designed to address.
Are we expecting to see, though, the expectation on grace periods and flexibility widen now that politicians, in the same way insurers have been under the spotlight? Although strictly speaking, you say if you're outside of that zone you just mentioned, an employer is not obligated to pay you to be away, that there could be calls for that to be widened, for that flexibility to grow.
That's right, and I think small, medium-sized businesses will feel the pinch a lot more if they don't have the luxury of being able to get work done in other states and territories. They will be under a lot of pressure, and they might be able to allow a little bit of slack for a couple of days, couple of weeks, but after that the employer viability issues are going to come to the fore. So I think strong message for employers: communicate openly with your staff, understand their needs, but also be very upfront in terms of what your own business situation is. Last thing you want employees to be thinking is that my job is there, it's safe, it's completely fine, I can take however much time I need, it'll still be there, if that's not going to be the case.
The next one's interesting as well, because if suddenly work dries up and it all links directly back to floods, so that you've got to say to workers, sorry, I just can't justify having you in the office, you've got to go, and I can't pay you either. If it can be linked back to floods, you'd say what? Legally, they are home and dry as an employer. Yeah,
well, I mean, employers have the right to stand employees down in those kinds of circumstances. Again, communication is critical. Employees will want to know, how long is this going to be the situation for? Should I start looking for work elsewhere? Do I need to uproot my family and consider an interstate move, or any of those kinds of things? Because
the question also on that one, it's come to my mind in the last few days, when is it in your control to prevent something like this? That is to say, there are communities that we've been made aware of, particularly in New South Wales now, where there has been warning, unlike that disaster of the inland tsunami in the Lockyer Valley, for instance. Other parts have had due notice, they've sandbagged. Could that be same said for businesses, that in the environment where there is warning, you were beholden to take action forewarned is forearmed, and that you can't fall back on that one as an employer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, occupational health and safety laws are pretty strict. If an employer had notice of a risk of one of these things, now I'm not aware of the relevant work cover authorities looking into it from a workplace health and safety point of view, but you're quite right. If employers were forewarned and they didn't take the necessary steps to prevent these from occurring, and it exposed employees to a health and safety danger, it's the last thing they want or need, but a timely reminder for all employers to just make sure they're paying attention to those risk alerts.
And equally, though, to be saying, look, there's no work for you when there could have been work if you had sandbagged all the rest of it in anticipation. That becomes, I guess, a thicket of legal.
Absolutely.
Recourse.
And again, not aware of unions getting too excited at this point in time in relation to challenging employers, but perhaps in the future they might.
I know you're on Twitter, of course, bringing that to viewers, so maybe when you hear about it, everyone else can as well.
I'll tweet, yeah.
Tweet away. Joydeep, see you next time. Many thanks. At Joydeep, or no less, on the Twitter account, on the tweet decks and all that. We'll take a very short break. Stick around. We'll check in with NAB's Rob Henderson for the latest on what's coming out of Europe when we come back.